Evening, everyone. I hope everyone had as warm as can possibly be on a blustery April afternoon. Had a good time with many of us family and friends and loved ones, and we're enjoying again the opportunity to come together, to worship together, to study God's Word, and to hopefully find some things that can be uplifting and useful to us, especially as we're talking about a very familiar set of passages for hopefully pretty much all of us. They're in Daniel chapter 6, just spending some time looking at the account of Daniel when he is thrown into the lion's den, some things that we can find hopefully encouraging to us, especially kind of going along with our bulletin this morning that we put out. When we know things are trying, we know it is difficult to be a follower of God. Sometimes we even know the detriment of being a follower of God will bring back some kind of pushback upon ourselves. What do? How do we remain faithful? And what are some encouraging things, even that change around us as we stick to what we believe, what we know to be true, in spite of what the world and what Satan might be trying to do? So let's begin there in Daniel chapter 6 and talk about a little bit of the background of the passage there and why this kind of trap is set for Daniel in the first place that leads him to be thrown into the lion's den. In Daniel chapter 6, Nebuchadnezzar is already gone. They really just have kind of a new kingdom already here. Daniel has lived through multiple kingdoms rising and falling. He's lost his own kingdom. He's watched the Babylonian Empire fall, and now he is serving under a new king in Daniel chapter 6. In Daniel 6, it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps to be throughout the whole kingdom, and over them 3 high officials, of whom Daniel was one, to whom the king might suffer no loss. And so here is this ruler, here is this, some of your versions may say governor, who is one of 3 high officials that pretty much here's the king, and then 3 kind of advisors, helpers, officials, or governors under him who are helping make sure the kingdom is running in place. And under them, whether it's 40 under each governor or all 120 satraps appoint to the governor and to the king, how it works, don't entirely know. But here's 120 men under them who are making sure everything is running in place. Taxes are being taken care of is one of the big things, that there might be no loss for the king would mean he is in charge of a lot of the monies there. One of the reasons why some of the other satraps kind of turn on Daniel has been proposed by different authors and different commentators. Well, if you're in charge of the kingdom of an entire money system, and one of you is a goody two-shoes, who is not going to defraud the king, who is not going to do anything to skim off the top, how well do you think that tends to go? Might be one of many reasons, even we'll list in the chapter, why Daniel distinguishes himself as not just a good governor and a good servant, but someone who might be standing in the way of the others getting what they want who are less than godly. Verse 3 continues, "Then Daniel became distinguished above all the other high officials and satraps because an excellent spirit was in him. And then," here's one of the other big reasons, "the king planned to set him over the whole kingdom." Not only do we have maybe these issues and power struggles, and sometimes we don't get along with our coworkers so great, but then, I don't know if you've seen it, I've seen it, coworkers can just kind of barely tolerate each other, and then one of them gets put above the others. You seen that go bad in the workplace? I have. Now imagine that on a kingdom-wide scale. Here's someone who has distinguished themselves, who is doing well, who is serving the king faithfully, is doing such a good job. I'm going to set you over everyone. Much like Joseph was in his day with Pharaoh, you will answer to no one, pretty much except Darius himself. Now, how do you imagine that happens to make his co-workers and satraps and officials also begin to feel? Before, he was just like one of us, and now he's even above us. He distinguishes himself. We sometimes use that word in a good way, and most often, that's probably how it's used. But it can also be used in a bad way when you distinguish yourself too much, you stick out too much by doing a good job. I don't know about you, I have faced that very same problem in different workplaces before too. Not the church, although I'm sure it could happen in the church too. But I've been in workplaces and I was told, again, one of Dad's stories that he liked to tell us, Raulerson's a pretty unique name. Make sure you represent that name well. I want the name Raulerson in our area to be a name that holds a good reputation. There's a lot of Smiths. There's a lot of Hopkins in my neck of the woods growing up. You had some good ones and you had some bad ones. Come or go. There are only a handful of Raulersons in the area. My grandparents, my parents, and my other two siblings. It takes one Raulerson to kind of start to ruin the name of somebody else. It takes one Raulerson to start to do good work, and that starts to elevate the name there. Well, when my coworkers heard, both at Arby's when I worked there and at Walmart when I worked there, hey, there's someone else in your family, a Raulerson, that also wants to work. Took me forever to get that job. We like you, bring him in. Tried my best to work as if I am working for the Lord. Tried my best in all ways to do as God would expect me to do. But there were coworkers that did not like me for that very reason. I'm at Walmart. All right, I got 4 pallets done in my shift. They average 1. Because they sit there and they talk and they take it slow and they don't do the work. I'm there to do the work, get it done, and go home. Because I know I'm not just going to leave that for another shift, because if we all start doing that, we'll never get done. I'm there to do the work. And there were some coworkers that really did not like me for that very reason. Now we've got men who hold the power of people's lives and nations in their hand. And Daniel has distinguished himself. For Darius, that's a great thing. I've got someone that I can trust that is working well for me. For his coworkers, that is a bad thing. He is making us look bad. I don't want Daniel around. Because he's doing what I either refuse to do or cannot do. And so they begin to envy him. Verse 4, then the high officials and satraps sought to find a ground for complaint against Daniel with regard to the kingdom. But they could find no ground for complaint or any fault, because he was faithful and no error or fault was found in him. Now we read that word faithful and our immediate instinct is Christian, someone who's a follower of God. And while that might also be true of Daniel, follower of God, faithful in this context is he's been given a job, he does it above and beyond as expected, the call of duty. There is nothing we can complain about with him. There is not the slightest fault we can find with him. So what do? Well, he's faithful. These men said, we will not find any ground for complaint against Daniel unless we find it in connection with the law of his God. Not only is he faithful in this work, we know he is devout and he is faithful in service of his God. So we're going to have to try and find something that conflicts with his God and with his worship, and now with his position with the king. That's going to be the only area where we could possibly find some kind of discrepancy. And so they begin to lay a trap. Verse 6, and these governors and satraps came to an agreement to the king and said to him, O King Darius, live forever. All the high officials of the kingdom, the prefects and the satraps, the counselors and the governors are agreed that the king should establish an ordinance and enforce an injunction that whoever makes petition to any god or man for 30 days, except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish the injunction and sign the document, that it cannot be changed according to the laws of the Medes and Persians, and that it cannot be revoked. Therefore, King Darius signed the document and the injunction. It's an interesting trap that's set here. Darius, we come to you with flowery language. We come to puff you up, to make you seem important. Let no worship be done, let no request, let no injunction, let nothing be done unless praise is first given to you and gone through you as an okay. Now, if you really think about this, to me, I don't know about you, this sounds like a nightmare. I don't want to micromanage everything like that. That sounds terrible. I've known congregations that have said, you can't teach anything outside of the church. An elder has to be present. And I know one gentleman, friend of mine, said, all right, I expect you at my house at 9:30 p.m. every night. I have a Bible study with my wife every night. Oh, well, that's not what I meant. Well, that's what you said. You've just signed something that really for Darius is a nightmare. To have to be involved with every single injunction to man or God is awful. But look at how they persuaded him. You remember that phrase Jared used last fall in his gospel meeting in Colossians? With smooth words. He's been persuaded. What makes a king seem like even more important? I mean, everyone has to come to me. Everyone has to make me feel as good or better than you feel right now. Everyone has to come and bow and kiss my feet. That sounds pretty nice. This wasn't about it being a good law, because it's a terrible law. It wasn't about making the king be more important than he already was. We know why this law was put into place the way it was. It was a trap specifically for Daniel. Because he's not going to put the king above his God. And this isn't something some different artistic representations or some different kids' storybooks have talked about this account and act as if Daniel didn't know about these things and he was unaware. And I think some of those accounts and some of those stories that have kind of retold this have done Daniel a disservice. Daniel not only was in a high position that he knows this has now been put into law and put into place. Daniel goes forward with this knowing a trap has been set for him. He makes the conscious choice here, not the accidental one, to put Jehovah above his king. Verse 10 continues in the account. When Daniel knew that the document had been signed, he went to his house, where he had the windows in the upper chamber open towards Jerusalem. He got down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God as he had done previously. This was such a common thing for Daniel to do, they knew how they could get him. Daniel was even so bold, he did not try to hide, he didn't try to cover it up. He remained as faithful as he was to God as he was before this law was set. This is my decision. This is how I pray to my God 3 times a day, and I'm going to keep doing that no matter whatever the consequences might be. Daniel made the conscious decision to stand alone, to stand firm, to do what God would expect of him and to do what he had already been doing. In spite of the trap, knowing the trap that had been set, Daniel did not change. Psalm 55 and verse 17 also reads, "Evening and morning and at noon I utter my complaint and moan, and he hears my voice." Daniel knows if I change, God's going to notice. And that will reflect poorly upon me, and more importantly, it will reflect poorly upon my God. If I remain as faithful as I have already been, through the days of my home being destroyed around me, my people, not too unlikely, some of his family, being slaughtered when he is a young man, is taken away into captivity. Through the challenges in Nebuchadnezzar's court, where they were training the wise men and they refused the alcohol and the food that the other men were being trained with. When I remained faithful, when the king's guard came to my door to slaughter me and my friends because no one could interpret the signs that Nebuchadnezzar saw in his dreams or tell him what he dreamed. When I remained faithful and told the king, you're going to be taken away into the field and eat like a beast in the field. Have bird's hair and feathers and claws come out of your body. If I could remain faithful in the previous chapter, in Daniel chapter 5, when King Belshazzar is feasting and using the implements there from the tabernacle to feast and party with while his city is under siege, and he could tell him the interpretations of the handwriting on the wall. If I can come through all of that only because God is with me, if I change now, then I let cowardice slip in, I backslide, and I will answer. No, I will remain faithful. I will not change. I will pray 3 times a day as I have always done, and the consequences of that will be whatever they may. Verse 11 continues then of Daniel chapter 6. Then these men came by agreement, found Daniel making petition and plea before his God. They knew where he would be. They knew what time he would be there. They knew what he would be doing. The law was set in place specifically to catch Daniel in the act, and you better believe as soon as they did, they went and reported it to the king. Verse 12, then they came near and said before the king concerning the injunction, O king, did you not sign an injunction that anyone who makes petition to any god or man within 30 days except to you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing stands fast according to the law of the Medes and Persians, which cannot be revoked. Then they answered and said before the king, Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah, pays no attention to you, O king, or the injunction you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day. Again, there's that flowery language. There's that buttering up. There's that almost, hey, didn't you sign a law? I seem to remember something about that. Do you remember signing this law? That was either signed probably that very same day or maybe the day before. And then after the king agrees, yes, I signed the law. It's held fast according to the Medes and Persians. We know what we just signed. Then they have to explain to him who Daniel is. Daniel, who is one of the exiles from Judah. Do you think that the king knows who Daniel is? He's distinguished himself so much, he's going to be put in charge of everyone. You know, if the rest of the account, we'll get to that in a moment, how much he loves Daniel and stays awake all night concerned for him once he's in the lion's den. They're acting as if they didn't know anything about this. They didn't know anything about what was going to happen or how Daniel was going to get caught in such a trap. Well, this same Daniel, he pays no attention to you. He petitions his God 3 times a day and does not come to you, King Darius. He's reported, and the king is put under pressure. He's loved by the king, but the king has also found himself in his own trap of his own making without realizing. Verse 14, when the king heard these words, he was much distressed and set his mind to deliver Daniel, and he labored till the sun went down to rescue him. The king's purpose is, if any way possible, I want to rescue Daniel. I don't just distinguish him as a good worker for me. It says the king loves Daniel. There is a close relationship here. that has been built by his being distinguished, by working with him. He trusts him. He loves him. He recognizes, at least to some level, probably only doing so well in his kingdom because Daniel is close at hand. And he tries all day to no avail while these same men are pressuring him over and over and over again to keep his law and to keep his word. Verse 15, then these men came by agreement to the king and said to him, know, O king, that it is law of the Medes and Persians that no injunction or ordinance that the king establishes can be changed. You sign this, you put this into law, it's really, according to their law, it's not even something you can change. The idea there was, if a king has put it into place, the king is a representation of their God, and a God is not so quick to turn around and change his mind in their eyes. King, if you've put it into place, and then you go back on it so quickly and renege on this, then that looks poorly upon you, and this cannot be done. He's in his own trap. And so the king does the only thing that he can do. He cast Daniel into the lion's den. Then the king commanded, and Daniel was brought and cast into the den of lions. And the king declared to Daniel, may your God, whom you serve continually, deliver you. And the stone was brought and laid at the mouth of the den. The king sealed it with his own signet, with the signet of his lords, that nothing might be changed concerning Daniel. By the way, not a one-to-one, but if you want a foreshadowing of what many people are celebrating today, here's a stone laid and a signet sealed, and the next day he's alive. He's not dead and risen, but he might as well be. Another one of those little foreshadowings if you never caught it before. But Daniel's been thrown into the lion's den. In the king's mind, for anyone, this is a death sentence. But there is a hope that Daniel be saved. In a lot of ways, for a king like Darius to say the words that he does in verse 16, it's pretty blasphemous. The king is literally a representation of the Medes and Persians' God. May your God, Daniel, be stronger. May your God, whom you are devout to, rescue you. I don't know how much Daniel's reputation is the word I'm looking for, has carried over from the Babylonian Empire to the Medes and Persians. If the stories of him with Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar have kept their reputation even as the kingdom has changed hands. Whether or not that is the case, the king understands who Daniel is, how faithful he is, and is hoping and praying that Daniel will be okay. And the trap does indeed prove to be useless. Verse 18, then the king went to his palace, spent the night fasting, no diversions were brought to him, and sleep fled from him. He wanted no food. He wanted no supper. He did not want to sleep. He did not want the normal distractions that would be brought to a king to be brought. I don't want music. I don't want someone to read the records like in the days of Esther to bore me to sleep. I want to be awake all night. I want to be in anguish. I want to be concerned for the friend that I love, hoping and praying that he survives. The king has made a conscious choice to be concerned for his friend and to pray that his God will rescue him. Verse 19 through 20 continues to show his concern. At the break of day, the king arose and went in haste to the den of lions. Soon as the day breaks, the king arises, he goes in haste in hope to the den of lions. In verse 20, as he came near the den where Daniel was, he cried out in a tone of anguish. The king declared to Daniel, "O Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God, whom you serve continually, been able to deliver you from the lion's mouth?" There is love, there is anguish, there is haste, there is, if any hope can be found, let the Most High God have been able to rescue you. And Daniel responds, shows that he is innocent, and shows that his God has been with him. Then Daniel said to the king, "O king, live forever. My God has sent his angels and shut the lions' mouths. They have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm." The intention here was, yes, he is guilty of breaking the new law that has been put into place. But why was that law put into place in the first place? It was to hurt Daniel first and foremost. And secondly, we've seen the proof here, it was to hurt the king. Daniel said, "I did not maliciously go and pray to my gods that it might hurt you and it might upset you. I did what the other governors have always known that I do. My worship did not change. I have done what you, Darius, king, know that I have always done. You said it with your own words. May your God, whom you worship always, deliver you from the lion's mouth." Darius knew what kind of man Daniel was. Darius, even if he did not follow the Most High God, recognized to some level Daniel worships the Most High God. He's rescued you before. He's rescued his servants before. Even as Israel is in captivity, Jehovah, their God, still has a reputation that has gone on through the ages. Darius knew what kind of man Daniel was. And even more so now, it has been exposed. This was not done because the satraps and the governors were so worried about the king's reputation. This was done to hurt Daniel, and this was done to hurt the king. And because of those things, Daniel is delivered not just by his God, he is delivered by the king and is taken out. Then the king was exceedingly glad. He commanded that Daniel be taken up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no kind of harm was found on him, because he trusted in his God. There was no scratch, there was no bite, there was no inflictions of any kind. As far as Daniel was concerned, I don't know if Daniel slept that night or not, but Daniel sure didn't seem worried. God was with me. He sent an angel to stop the lion's mouth. There was no harm. There's nothing to be worried about as far as Daniel's were concerned. But you better believe probably at this point Daniel's enemies are pretty concerned. Daniel's now proven himself to be innocent, and the meaning of the king and the meaning of the governors have shown themselves. Pay attention to the king's words in verse 24. And the king commanded that those men who had maliciously accused Daniel were to be brought out and cast into the den of lions. They, their children, and their wives. And before they even reached the bottom of the den, the lions overpowered them and broke all their bones in pieces. These seem like hungry animals. Without getting too brutal, you better believe it. They didn't even reach the bottom. And the animals were already pouncing. Do you believe the king understood why these men did what they did? It's in their condemnation. It's in their sentencing. They maliciously tried to come and do these things. God's word is full of accounts like this, where he is in control, where vengeance is his, declares the Lord. One of my favorite other accounts that we haven't studied for some time, but is Esther chapter 7. You remember the giant gallows that Haman began to make for Mordecai? Just because he was so angry at Mordecai, he wanted all the Israelites wiped out from the face of the earth. Esther 7 and verse 10, so they hanged Haman on the very gallows that he had prepared for Mordecai. Then the king's wrath, Esther's husband, was abated. Because he begins to put the pieces together once it's revealed who Esther is, who Esther's people are, who Esther's uncle Mordecai is, who it is that saved the king from a plot to kill him, and who it is that's been making these plans that the Israelites be wiped out and Haman be hanged on the highest gallows for all people to see. You want to bring retribution against God's people, God will protect you. Even men who do not follow God, God will use kings and powers as his tools, either for righteous or as tools if if they are unrighteous. Over in Psalm chapter 7, there verse 14, was written well before Daniel in the lion's den. It was written by David. But over and over, David fell into a similar situation where multiple times he had those that were out for him, in large part because of who he worshiped and who he served. How he proved himself to be a servant of the Most High God first and foremost before anyone else. Notice just a few verses of that psalm, beginning in Psalm 7 there in verse 14. Behold, the wicked man conceives evil. He is pregnant with mischief and gives birth to lies. He makes a pit, digging it out, and falls into a hole of his own creation. His mischief returns upon his own head, and on his own skull his violence descends. But I will give to the Lord the thanks due to his righteousness, and I will sing praise of the name of the Lord Most High. Nowhere in this account of Daniel does Daniel take justice into his own hands. Does he call out for these men to be punished? Daniel, just like while he was in the lion's den, leaves it in the hand of his God. The truth eventually comes out. Daniel is proven not by some great defense, not by some persuasive words, but by standing firm and doing as God would have him to do. Proves himself to be innocent. And those that would go against God and his people are punished. And because of it, not just Daniel, but Daniel's God is praised throughout the kingdom. Verse 25, then King Darius wrote to all the peoples, nations, and languages that dwell along the earth, peace be multiplied to you. Excuse me. I make a decree that in all my royal dominion, people are to tremble and fear before the God of Daniel. For he is the living God, enduring forever. His kingdom shall never be destroyed. His dominion shall be to the end. He delivers and rescues. He works signs and wonders in heaven and on earth. He has saved Daniel from the power of the lions. You know, it's interesting to me, even as I was rereading this recently, out of the mouth of Darius, prophecy comes. God uses Darius, just like he uses Daniel, to further his kingdom and to further his work. Even if Darius believes from this day forth or does not, much like with Nebuchadnezzar, God is praised. A decree is put out through the land, and it is told to the people under Darius's reign, including Israelites under his reign, who at this point, we've been studying on Wednesday night, are not very close to God themselves either. that it is the God, Jehovah, who has rescued Daniel and who is still with those who serve him faithfully. So Daniel continues to prosper. So this Daniel prospered during the reign of Darius and the reign of Cyrus the Persian. And as far as in the book of Daniel, that kind of ends the stories of him and the kings that he works under. We know the rest of the book of Daniel is mostly dealing with prophecies that he sees and visions that he sees dealing with the coming kingdom that even Darius just talked about. But over and over, the lessons from Daniel are ones that we can take to heart. First and foremost, do we, like Daniel, have that excellent spirit? That I will do all things as if I am serving the Lord. That there are temptations, there are trials, there are things that we endure in this earth. It is inevitable. The situation with Daniel in Daniel chapter 6 turns into kind of the extreme example, but it's one that hopefully a lot of us kind of empathize with. Bad coworkers. People who are not dealing well with us. People who are angry and jealous and bitter and scheming and gossiping behind our back when we're just trying to do our job and live our lives. We have a choice. We can be drugged down to their level, and I heard Kenny say this earlier today. I can be drugged down to their level and I can be beat by them because they have more experience. Or I can stand firm even if I stand alone. I can follow God. I can serve him well. Which would you rather be? More than that, do we deal fairly with others? Even in the midst of all of that, the problem that they ran into with Daniel when they tried to find something about him is that there is no ground, there is no complaint, there is no fault. He is faithful in everything that he does. Can the same be said about you? Among neighbors, among coworkers, among loved ones, that same type of language is used to describe the qualifications for an elder in Timothy and Titus. Not that nothing can ever be said about you, because men can say anything. But can it stick? Am I living my life, shining my light as a city set on a hill? Or am I two-faced? Am I a hypocrite? You know, the problem with the Pharisees and Sadducees is they presented one thing, but everyone knew when Jesus starts talking about the hypocrisy of the Pharisees and Sadducees, you notice there's not really a whole lot of pushback from the Jewish people, is there? Why do you think that is? They saw it too. They can see the hypocrisy. They can see what the law says and what their religious leaders are not doing. They can see them binding one set of rules for themselves and a completely different for another. Folks can see you go to church, talk about your God, try to be good, and see the other side when the hypocrite comes out. Am I trying to deal fairly and be that shining light and that example, no matter who is watching? Or am I changing masks and faces and hats, depending on who I'm interacting with? Are we faithful in all things, not just worship, and that is important, but in the home with our family? At the workplace with coworkers? With strangers that you might never see again? What kind of person are you? Are you committed in prayer like Daniel? I can be the first one to raise my hand. I struggle with this sometimes. I know what I should be doing. I know how I should be praying, but I let those excuses and those things get in the way. And I don't pray with the frequency and like I should. I sometimes have to be reminded at the dinner table or before bed or whatever it may be, hey, we going to say a prayer? I sometimes catch myself going, when's the last time, not just the normal prayers of morning, evening, dinner time, when's the last time I just sat and prayed and talked with God? And the answer sometimes is, I don't know. Daniel had a habit here, and it wasn't just a rote habit that this is what he did. This was what he held himself to by choice. This was not some kind of strict requirement that came from God that he had to do in order to follow Jewish custom. This was a decision he made for himself, and he stuck to it. With such regularity, they knew where to find him and when. Can the same be said about us? Even if not just prayer, do your friends and family know where you are on Sunday morning? Sunday night, Wednesday night? I've had friends that have kind of responded, are you ever free? Not on Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday night. You're free to come with me and we can go out somewhere afterwards. But that's not going to change. Are you committed to God in that same way? Or is it only when it's convenient for me? When I have a Band-Aid that needs to fix a problem that I have? Or when I feel like it? Do you trust in God the same way that Daniel did? In the midst of that turmoil, are we tossed about this morning like we read in Ephesians chapter 4, like a ship caught out at sea, to and fro and not knowing where we're going? Or do I trust, even as I'm being thrown into the proverbial lion's den, my God is with me? Whether I live, whether I die, whatever happens, that will not change. There is laid up for me a crown of life. One last thing that we didn't really point out here in Daniel chapter 6 is his age also. This is when he is an elderly man at this point. Sometimes we're faithful when we're young, and we start out well like we talked about this morning, but we don't finish the race well. I have seen those that I love dearly that were pivotal in helping shape me into the Christian I am today. Then in their old age, in their 70s, in their 80s, they departed from the faith. They became bitter, sinful, jaded, and really there is no better word, evil people who departed from their God. I don't want that language to be spoken of you at your funeral. I want to be said of you, as far as I'm aware, they fought the good fight, they finished the race. And I look forward to seeing them for eternity. Daniel kept it up until the end. There's a temptation there to be like, I am too old for this pettiness. I am too old for this drama. I am too old for kingdom after kingdom rising and falling and the same old story playing out. Lord, take me now and be done. He let God continue to use him until the very end. And when it was God's time to call him home, I have faith, based on the life that I can see he lived, we'll get to be with him in heaven for eternity if we remain faithful as well. If you don't have that kind of faith at all because you have not obeyed the gospel, it can start this evening. The water's ready. We can help you. If you have questions about that, we can answer it. If you are here this evening, if you know the truth, you followed the gospel, you've done as God said, but you have lost sight of your way, now is the night to make it right. If it's sin of a private nature, take care of it. Pray to God. If it's of a public nature that has brought shame upon his name, take care of it this evening. Come forward and confess those things. Let us help you. Let us pray with you, and let us do what we can. Whatever the case may be this evening, if in any way we can help you in those things, please let it be known as together we stand and sing the song that has been selected.